You're here because you want to learn something important. You've heard people talk about index funds. Maybe your friend mentioned them. Maybe you saw a video about investing. But no one explained it in a way that made you feel calm. Most people throw big words around. You're just looking for something simple, something that makes sense, something that works. This video will teach you exactly what index funds are and why they matter. We'll show you how they can help you grow money over time without needing to know anything about the stock market. You'll understand how they protect you from big losses and help you stay steady even when the world feels uncertain. We'll explore how they work, who created them, and why so many smart people use them, and we'll do it all gently, with stories and quiet moments. By the end of this video, you'll understand index funds like a friend explained them over tea. You'll know what to look for, you'll know how they grow, and most of all, you'll know that you're not behind, you're right on time, and you don't need to rush. We'll show you how one fund can hold hundreds of companies. You'll see how small amounts invested regularly can grow into something big. You'll hear about the people who invented index funds and the everyday people who use them. And you'll hear why this simple tool can change your whole relationship with money. If you stay with us until the end, you'll have a calm, clear understanding of what an index fund really is, why they are so safe and reliable, how to start using them without stress, and it won't feel overwhelming. It will feel like putting together a puzzle slowly, one gentle piece at a time. So if you've ever felt lost when people talk about investing, this video is for you. If you've ever wanted to build wealth but didn't know how to begin, this video is for you. If you've ever wished someone would just sit beside you and explain it slowly, like a bedtime story, then this video is for you. Because index funds are not about getting rich fast, they're about getting calm for the long term. And tonight, that calm begins here. A soft rain tapped against the window. It was nearly midnight, and Jordan sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, face lit by a dull screen glow. He had just finished paying bills. Rent, groceries, minimum on the credit card. And somehow, the numbers still didn't feel right. He wasn't broke, but he wasn't growing either. Something was missing. He had tried budgeting, tried saving, he even downloaded one of those apps that tracks every coffee purchase. But still, the future felt like fog. He'd heard friends talk about investing. He'd even Googled a few things. But every time he saw the words mutual fund or ETF, he felt like a tourist in a language he didn't speak. That night, the word index fund showed up again. It was in a quiet Reddit thread called Simple Wealth. Someone said they stopped picking stocks and just invested in the S&P 500. That phrase, S&P 500, sounded like a password he didn't know, but the person said it helped them sleep better. That stuck with him. The idea of a money choice that lets you sleep, not stress. He clicked one more link, then another. Somewhere between confusion and curiosity, he asked himself the real question. Not what is an index fund, but can I really understand this without feeling stupid? He didn't need to be a millionaire. He just wanted to stop feeling lost. Let's pause here, because maybe that's you too. Maybe you've heard terms like index fund, diversification, or asset allocation, and felt that same cloudiness. You're not alone. Most schools don't teach this. Most parents never explained it. And most of us were taught that investing is either risky or only for the rich. But here's the truth. Index funds are one of the simplest, calmest, most beginner-friendly paths to growing wealth. Slowly, quietly, and safely. So what are they really? Imagine a basket. Inside the basket are tiny slices of hundreds of different companies, like Apple, Walmart, Coca-Cola, Google. Instead of trying to guess which single stock will win, you just buy the whole basket. That's an index fund. It lets you own little pieces of many companies at once. This basket follows something called an index, a list that tracks a part of the stock market. One of the most popular is the S&P 500. That's a list of the 500 largest, most stable companies in America. When you invest in an S&P 500 index fund, you're investing in all of them at the same time. So when one company struggles, another might rise. That balance protects you. You're not betting on one star, you're riding the whole wave. Jordan didn't know that yet, but that's what he would learn. And when he did, everything changed. Not overnight, but over time. Let's take a breath here. If this feels new, or even a little blurry, that's okay. You're not late, you're not behind. You're just stepping onto a path that many people take long after they wish they had. What makes index funds so peaceful is not just their simplicity, but their emotional safety. You don't have to watch the market every day. You don't need to read financial news. You don't need to pick the next Amazon. You just need to choose a fund that follows a broad index and let it grow while you live your life. This is what Jordan would come to learn. But back in his kitchen, under the flickering fridge light, he still felt like he was wandering in a financial forest. There were paths, but no map. Sounds, but no guide. The voices in his head weren't cruel, but they were confused. Is this too late to learn? Am I smart enough for this? What if I lose money? These are normal thoughts. Every beginner hears them. Even experienced investors still feel them sometimes. But what Jordan, and maybe you, are about to discover is that those questions are not stop signs, they are invitations. Because understanding index funds isn't about mastering the stock market, it's about unlearning fear, and that starts with one small question. What if growing money didn't have to feel risky? That night, Jordan clicked on a video called Why Index Funds Work. He didn't understand all the terms, but something in the narrator's tone, slow, clear, kind, helped him stay. They explained how index funds don't try to beat the market, they just are the market, and because the market grows over time, so does the fund. He didn't feel excited, he felt calm. That was new. He learned about something called passive investing, the idea that you don't have to trade, guess, or time anything. You invest regularly and let time do the heavy lifting. It was the opposite of everything he thought investing had to be, and slowly, the forest began to clear. He read about a man named Jack Bogle, the father of index funds, and how he created them to help regular people, not just Wall Street insiders. Jordan liked that, a system designed for normal people, something made to work, not wow. The fog in his mind wasn't gone yet, but now he had a flashlight, and you do too. As we drift deeper into this story, we'll walk with Jordan as he takes his first small steps. We'll see how index funds compare to other ways of investing. We'll explain terms like expense ratios, dividends, and automatic investing, all in simple, gentle ways. You'll meet other characters too, people who made mistakes, learned slowly, and found their rhythm. Because money stories are not written in straight lines. They unfold, softly, like this one. And what comes next is something most people never hear, the quiet truth that changed everything for Jordan. Jordan sat still in the glow of his laptop screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, not searching for more answers this time, but simply letting the quiet sink in. The more he read, the more one name kept showing up, calm and steady, like a lighthouse in fog. Jack Bogle. Jordan didn't know who he was. He didn't sound flashy, but something about the way people spoke of him felt different, warm, almost grateful. Jack Bogle wasn't like the loud voices Jordan had seen online. He didn't promise millions in a month or shout about winning strategies. Instead, he believed that investing should be boring, fair, and almost invisible. He once said, "Don't look for the needle in the haystack, just buy the haystack." That idea was the beginning of something big and something incredibly calm. Bogle created the first index fund for regular people in 1975. At the time, most investors tried to beat the market by picking stocks or hiring managers to do it for them. But most of them failed, especially after fees. Jack had a better idea. Why not own the entire market? Quietly, steadily, and cheaply. The fund he launched followed the S&P 500, a list of 500 of the biggest companies in the US. Instead of chasing the next big thing, it simply mirrored the market. No guesswork, no wild swings, just quiet ownership of what already worked. And the best part, it cost almost nothing to run. That meant more of the money stayed with the person investing. People laughed at him at first. They called it Bogle's folly and said it would never catch on. But Jack wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was trying to protect people from high fees, from hype, and from unnecessary risk. He wanted investing to be accessible, not elite. Jordan felt a strange comfort reading this. Here was someone who had built something for people like him, people who didn't grow up with financial advice, people who didn't want to beat the system, but just wanted to belong in it. Jack Bogle had created a path not for winners, but for beginners. And that changed everything. The more Jordan read, the more he realized how rare Bogle's approach was. He didn't treat investors like gamblers. He treated them like caretakers, people who had dreams, fears, and responsibilities. He believed most people didn't need fancy strategies. They just needed something that worked quietly in the background. Jack often spoke about costs. He said, "In investing, you get what you don't pay for." That meant the lower the fees, the more your money could grow. Index funds were low cost because they didn't try to outsmart the market. They simply followed it, and that made them peaceful. Jordan learned that if you invest in an S&P 500 index fund, you're buying small pieces of 500 companies. You don't have to choose winners or worry about losers. The strong companies lift the weak ones, and over time, the whole group grows. That's what makes it feel safe, not because it's perfect, but because it's balanced. That balance makes it easier to sleep at night. Bogle didn't just care about money, he cared about trust. He wanted people to feel like they weren't being tricked or taken advantage of. He created Vanguard, a company owned by its own investors, so that its goals stayed aligned with the people it served. That meant lower costs, more honesty, and a mission built on service, not sales. Jordan leaned back in his chair and imagined what it would be like to invest in something that didn't feel like gambling. He wasn't looking for excitement, he was looking for peace. The more he read about Jack Bogle, the more he felt like that peace was possible, not in some far-off future, but maybe even now. He didn't need to have it all figured out to take one small, quiet step. Jack Bogle believed that the power of investing wasn't in being clever, it was in being consistent. He said the most important qualities for an investor were patience and discipline. Not because the market is always easy, but because it always grows. If you give it time, that's what an index fund does. It grows like a garden you water gently, not a race you run fast. For Jordan, this was the first time investing felt kind. It wasn't about chasing something, it was about planting something. And slowly, a seed of calm started to take root. He didn't have to be rich to start, he just had to begin. He looked at the Vanguard website, where Jack Bogle's legacy still lived on. There were funds with names like VFIAX and VTSAX. They sounded complicated, but their purpose was simple. They held hundreds, sometimes thousands of companies in one easy-to-buy fund. You could start with a small amount and add more each month. And over time, that small amount could grow into something life-changing. But it wasn't just about the money. Jordan realized something deeper. It was about feeling like you had a plan, something stable, something soft, something that worked quietly in the background, like a lullaby for your finances. That was the real gift Jack Bogle gave people. Not a shortcut to wealth, but a slow path to security. Jordan closed his laptop and looked out the window. The rain had stopped and the sky had cleared. He didn't feel like a financial expert, but he no longer felt lost. He had met the man who made investing simple, and that gave him hope. As he turned off the lights and crawled into bed, he thought about something Jack once said: "Stay the course." It wasn't loud, it wasn't urgent, it was steady, like a heartbeat. That's what index funds felt like now. Not exciting, but alive. And with that, Jordan fell asleep. He dreamed not of charts or numbers, but of a long road ahead, smooth and steady. What he didn't know yet was what that road was made of, or how a simple basket filled with tiny pieces of the world could carry him further than he ever imagined. Morning light drifted through the curtains like a soft exhale. Jordan woke up feeling different, not totally confident, but no longer afraid. The fear that used to live in the word investing was now replaced by something gentler. He didn't understand everything yet, but he felt like he could, and that quiet belief was new. He opened his laptop again, not to scroll or stress, but to follow the next thread. He typed in a phrase that felt more like a riddle than a fact. What exactly is in an index fund? What he found surprised him. It wasn't magic or mystery, it was something he could picture, something he could hold in his mind. A basket, a simple, quiet basket. Index funds are like baskets filled with tiny slices of companies. Each slice represents a small share, a piece of ownership in that company. The fund doesn't just hold one or two stocks. That means if one company struggles, another may be growing, and that balance keeps the whole basket strong. Jordan read that some index funds follow a big list of companies, like the S&P 500, others track the total US market, or even international markets. Some include tech giants, others include small-town businesses, or steady blue-chip firms. The key is that you don't have to choose them yourself. The index does the choosing, and the fund follows. He imagined it like a big grocery basket in a store. Instead of picking each item one by one, you're handed a basket already filled with healthy basics. It's not flashy, it's not trendy, but it's full of what you need. And when you carry it regularly, it nourishes your future. The more Jordan learned, the more he liked the word passive. Not passive in a lazy way, passive like peaceful. You set up your investment, you add money over time, and the fund does the work, tracking the market, holding the shares, reinvesting the earnings. It grows quietly while you live your life. He read about something called market capitalization. That's just a way of measuring how big a company is, its total value. In most index funds, the bigger the company, the bigger its slice in the basket. So if Apple or Microsoft is doing well, their weight helps lift the whole fund, and that's how the value of your investment rises over time. Jordan also discovered that index funds don't try to predict winners. They don't chase trends or dump stocks in a panic. They simply hold what's in the index, rebalancing when the index changes. That means less guessing, fewer fees, and less emotional decision-making. For Jordan, that felt like investing with a seatbelt on. He remembered all the times he had tried to figure out the stock market. He'd watched friends talk about GameStop and crypto and options trading. He never joined, not because he didn't want to, but because it felt like a world built on fast moves and fast losses. Now, he saw a different way. A quiet, boring way. But boring in the best sense. He read that many of the world's top investors, even billionaires, recommend index funds for regular people. Warren Buffett once said that most people would be better off just putting their money into an index fund and leaving it alone. Not because they're lazy, but because simplicity wins. Time in the market beats timing the market. And that was something Jordan could finally understand. He also learned about risk. Not the kind that keeps you up at night, but the kind that teaches you how to breathe. Index funds still go up and down. But because they hold so many companies, they're less likely to crash hard. And if you stay invested long enough, history shows they almost always recover. That's why time, not timing, is your real superpower. Instead of asking, "Will this make me rich?" he started asking, "Will this help me sleep?" And the answer was yes. Because this wasn't about being clever, it was about being consistent. And index funds were made for that. He read about people who started with $50 a month. They didn't change their whole lives overnight. They just kept adding to their baskets, month by month, year by year. And 20 or 30 years later, those baskets had grown into something beautiful. Not because of luck, but because of time and trust. There was a word for this: compounding. It means your money makes money, and then that money makes more money. It's slow at first, almost invisible. But like planting seeds in a garden, it adds up over time. That's why the best investors often say, start early, stay steady. Jordan smiled at the simplicity. He didn't have to beat anyone, he just had to begin. He could buy a fund that followed the market and add to it little by little. And while the world rushed around him, his money would grow in peace. It felt like finding a rhythm he didn't know he was missing. The less he stressed about picking the right stock, the more energy he had to live his life. He wasn't refreshing charts or checking news updates. He wasn't trying to outguess the future. He was just living. Jordan found comfort in knowing he didn't have to do this alone. Millions of people invested in index funds every day. People who wanted stability, not stress. And that made him feel less alone. He wondered what would happen if schools taught this. If young people were shown that investing wasn't about being perfect, it was about building slowly, starting small, and giving yourself permission to be patient. That was the dream Jack Bogle had, and now it was becoming Jordan's too. He looked back at the basket analogy. In that one fund, he could own companies he used every day: the phone in his hand, the store on his street, the food he bought, the clothes he wore. It wasn't just money, it was ownership, and that made him feel powerful in the quietest way. He realized something deeper. This basket wasn't just full of stocks, it was full of stories, of workers, inventors, creators, builders. When he invested in the market, he was believing in human effort, in progress, in the future. And that made index funds more than a tool. It made them a vote of confidence in the world. That night, Jordan opened a new tab on his browser. He didn't sign up for anything yet. He just browsed, looked at some beginner-friendly brokerages, read the descriptions of popular index funds, and let himself imagine, what if this was the first step in a brand new story? He didn't feel rushed. He didn't feel afraid. He felt like someone opening a quiet door, not into chaos, but into clarity. And that door led somewhere soft, steady, and strong. But how do you actually begin building with index funds without getting overwhelmed? Jordan didn't rush. He didn't open an account that night. He didn't search for the top 10 index funds or ask which one would make him the most money. Instead, he sat with his thoughts, letting them settle like warm tea on a cold morning. He was learning something important. The best decisions don't come from urgency. They come from clarity. He grabbed a notebook and wrote 4 simple words across the top of the page. Build the basket slowly. It made him smile, because that's exactly how it felt. He wasn't trying to buy a dream overnight. He was building something solid, one small piece at a time. And he wanted to know how to begin with calm, not chaos. So the next day, he asked a better question. Not what should I buy, but what makes an index fund good for someone like me? He wasn't looking for flash or fame. He was looking for peace. He learned there were 3 things that made a beginner-friendly index fund feel safe. First, it needed to be diversified. That meant it had to include many companies, not just a few. He wanted a basket full of variety. Big companies, small companies, different industries. That way, if one piece of the market dipped, the others could hold steady. Diversity didn't just protect his money, it protected his sleep. Second, it needed to have low fees. He learned about something called the expense ratio. It's a tiny cost that comes out each year, like a maintenance fee for holding the fund. The lower that fee, the more of his money stayed in the fund, growing quietly. And some funds had fees so low, they barely cost a penny on every $100. Third, it needed to match his comfort level. Some funds follow the entire US market. Others track just the top 500 companies. Some include international stocks. Jordan didn't need to know everything, just enough to feel at ease. And that meant choosing one that felt balanced and simple. He came across names like VTI, VOO, and FXAIX. They looked like robot codes at first, but behind each name was a basket, a collection of real companies, real workers, real progress. And over the past 20 or 30 years, these baskets had grown quietly, gently, year by year. That's what he wanted, a quiet place to grow. Now that he knew what made a fund safe, he asked himself the next question: where do you actually go to buy one? He discovered something called a brokerage account. It's like a digital wallet where you can buy and hold investments. Some people use apps like Fidelity, Vanguard, or Charles Schwab. Others use beginner-friendly platforms like SoFi or M1 Finance. The key was choosing one that didn't charge hidden fees and felt easy to use. Jordan took a deep breath. The idea of opening an account used to scare him, but now it felt different, like setting up a home for his future. He didn't need to put in a lot. Even $10 or $50 was enough to begin. He saw something calming in that. He didn't need to have it all figured out to begin. He just needed to take a small, kind action. And that meant open the account, pick the fund, and start slow. That was enough. Jordan read something Jack Bogle once said: "Don't do something, just stand there." It made him laugh softly, because in a world full of noise and movement, this kind of investing was about not moving. It was about setting it and letting it be. He began thinking about how much to invest. There was no magic number, no pressure to pour everything in. The advice was always the same. Invest what you can regularly, even if it's small. $50 a month, $100 a paycheck. Whatever fits your life gently. And here's the secret Jordan didn't know before. It adds up. Not right away, not dramatically, but slowly and surely, like snowflakes building into a blanket. Like sunlight nudging a seed into a sprout. He wrote himself a reminder in his notebook. It's not about the amount, it's about the habit. He also learned that many people set up something called automatic investing. It's a feature that pulls a little bit of money from your bank account each month, like a subscription to your future. Once it's set up, you don't have to think about it. No guilt, no forgetting, no last-minute doubts, just quiet progress in the background. Jordan smiled again. This wasn't about being a stock expert. It was about designing a system that worked while he lived his life. One that kept going whether he was focused or distracted, motivated or tired, because life gets busy. And this way, his money wouldn't wait for the perfect moment. It would just keep growing. He also explored the idea of reinvesting dividends. Some index funds pay small earnings, little bits of profit from the companies they hold. Instead of taking that money out, many investors choose to reinvest it. That means buying more pieces of the fund. And that's where compounding happens again, quietly, like interest stacking on interest. It's not flashy, but it's powerful. Jordan felt proud, not because he'd mastered everything, but because he was moving differently now. He wasn't reacting out of fear. He was building out of peace. He remembered nights when money felt like a storm, when he avoided his bank app, when he told himself, "I'm just bad at this." But now he was beginning to see he wasn't bad at money. He was just never taught how to relate to it gently. Index funds weren't just about investing, they were about healing. They taught him that you don't have to hustle to earn worth, that your money can grow without stress, that being steady is enough, and that peace is not a reward, it's a right you can give yourself starting now. He looked at the basket he was about to build. Inside, it would be tiny pieces of companies he didn't need to pick or worry about. It would sit there, growing with the economy, not loudly, not quickly, but surely. And that made him feel safe. He was beginning to understand something deeper. It wasn't just about building wealth. It was about building a future he could trust, one that didn't depend on luck or skill, just time and belief. But where do these baskets actually live, and who takes care of them? Jordan took another deep breath, not because he was overwhelmed, but because for the first time, things were starting to make sense. Index funds weren't fast, they weren't loud. They didn't demand all of him. They offered calm, predictability, comfort, and now he had one final question echoing softly in his mind. If I build the basket, who holds it for me? He imagined someone in a suit behind a giant vault, guarding his investments like treasure. He pictured levers, control rooms, blinking lights. But the truth was simpler and much softer. Index funds are built and managed by companies called investment firms. These aren't banks, they're more like quiet caretakers. They design the basket, then they manage it gently, following the index it's tied to, like a mirror that reflects the market. Jordan discovered names like Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, and BlackRock. They weren't influencers or TikTok gurus. They were institutions with decades of experience built to serve long-term investors. And unlike stock pickers who try to beat the market, these companies focused on tracking it faithfully. That faithfulness made Jordan feel safe. He was especially drawn to Vanguard, the company Jack Bogle had founded. Unlike most companies, Vanguard is owned by its investors. That means when you invest in one of their funds, you're not just a customer, you're part of the mission. They don't have outside shareholders pushing for profit. Instead, their focus stays on keeping costs low and values high. That structure is rare and powerful. Jordan liked the word custodian. That's what these firms are called when they hold your investments. It's not just a financial word. It sounds like someone who takes care, and that's exactly what they do. They hold your shares safely in your account, and you're the one who owns them. He learned that when you buy into an index fund, your money doesn't go to the firm itself. It goes into the basket, directly invested in real companies. Vanguard or Fidelity simply manage the fund, tracking the index, handling rebalancing, and reinvesting dividends if you ask. They don't touch your money, they guide it. This separation gave Jordan a sense of control. He wasn't handing over his future to a stranger. He was choosing a path and placing his trust with a firm that followed clear, steady rules. No guessing, no gambling. Just calm, algorithmic reflection of the market's rhythm. Like a tide that gently rolls forward day after day. He discovered something called a prospectus, a soft word for a simple document. It told him everything he needed to know about a fund, what companies were inside it, how much it cost, how it performed. No secrets, no fine print tricks, just quiet transparency, like reading the ingredients before buying a box of cereal. That made him feel respected. Jordan learned that funds are usually supervised by professional teams. But in index funds, the decisions are minimal. They don't try to predict the future. They simply update the fund when the index changes, maybe once a quarter or a few times a year. This meant fewer mistakes and fewer fees. He liked that part because he didn't want someone buying and selling constantly with his money. He wanted stability, someone to hold the basket, not shake it. And index fund managers did just that. He also found out that his investments would live in something called a brokerage account. It's not a savings account, but it feels just as safe. It's a place where he could buy, sell, and watch his investments grow. The money stayed in his name, the fund lived inside the account, and the custodian, Vanguard or Fidelity, simply kept it safe. There were extra layers of protection too. Jordan read about SIPC insurance, which protects investors if a firm ever closes. It doesn't cover losses from market changes, but it makes sure your investments are still yours, even if a firm disappears. Just like your clothes don't vanish if the store you bought them from shuts down. That gave Jordan one more reason to relax. He noticed something else comforting. These firms weren't sending him emails about urgent moves. They weren't selling dreams or shouting predictions. They encouraged long-term investing. They offered education, not noise. And that quiet support was exactly what Jordan needed. He began to understand why so many people stick with one firm for life, because when your basket is built gently, held safely, and left to grow, you don't need to chase anything else. You just keep going. Month after month, year after year, Jordan also learned about fractional shares. In the past, you needed hundreds or thousands of dollars to buy full shares of certain funds. Now, many brokerages let you invest with just a few dollars. Buying a slice of a slice, that meant he could begin right away. No waiting for a big windfall, just quiet action. He remembered something from earlier, the idea of automatic investing. He could set up his account so that every month a small amount went into the fund. No stress, no decisions, just routine. And when he didn't think about it, he wouldn't be tempted to stop, because that's how wealth grows. Not in loud moments, but in consistent ones. By now, the word index fund didn't sound scary at all. It sounded like a friend, a steady, patient friend who asked nothing more than time and trust. And Jordan was ready to give both because the peace it brought him was priceless. He looked at his notebook again. He wrote one final reminder. I'm not trying to get rich overnight. I'm building a future I won't need a vacation from. He thought of his future self. Older, calmer, looking back at this moment. He'd remember this not as the day he became an expert, but as the day he chose a different way. A way of softness, simplicity, safety, a way of quiet growth. But what if the world changes? What happens when the market crashes, or rises, or stumbles? It was a rainy night when the thought returned. Jordan sat by his window, watching drops slide slowly down the glass. He felt calm, mostly, but a quiet question echoed at the edge of his comfort. A whisper he hadn't answered yet. What happens if the market falls? It wasn't a dramatic fear anymore. Not like before, when money felt like a monster under the bed, but it was still a worry, soft, steady, unspoken, and that night, Jordan gave it space. Because fear loses power when it's gently acknowledged. He remembered the graphs he'd seen. The market looked like a messy lineup. Down, up, down again, like ocean waves on a stormy sea. Some years were peaceful, others wild, and in every dip, he imagined people panicking, selling, retreating. But he also saw something else. Every fall eventually led to a rise. The waves didn't end in darkness, they ended in growth. Not always fast, but always forward. He learned there's a word for those falls, corrections. Sometimes they're shallow, sometimes deep, but they're always part of the cycle. Like seasons shifting, no matter how much we wish for endless summer. Jordan thought back to March 2020. The whole world felt uncertain. Markets dropped, people panicked, but those who stayed calm, who didn't pull out their money, saw it rise again just months later. That was the lesson. Don't jump off the boat in the middle of the storm. He read about a man named Peter who invested steadily from the 1990s. Peter never timed the market. He just kept adding to his index fund, month after month. He lived through recessions, tech crashes, housing bubbles, pandemics, but when he looked at his balance 30 years later, it was 10 times what he had put in. Not because Peter was lucky, but because he was patient. He didn't let dips define his plan. He treated them like potholes, not roadblocks, and that mindset changed everything. Jordan smiled at a quote he found. The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. Warren Buffett said that, and the words sank deep. He imagined the market like a forest. Sometimes it bloomed with color. Sometimes it seemed bare, asleep, frozen, but it always came back, because underneath, the roots kept growing. That's what index funds do. They don't panic. They don't sell. They hold like hands around a candle in the wind. They trust that after the fall comes the rise. And that belief becomes your strength. Jordan read about something called dollar cost averaging. It means investing the same amount regularly, no matter what the market is doing. When prices drop, your money buys more. When prices rise, your money buys less. But over time, it balances out. And that smooths the bumps along the way. He liked the image of buying during a sale. When the market drops, shares are on sale, not because they're broken, but because emotion, fear, or news has shifted the price. And that's when long-term investors smile gently, because they know they're getting more for less. But Jordan also understood this. Even with all the logic, emotions still matter. Watching your money dip even a little can feel scary. That's normal, that's human, and it's okay. He remembered something else. You only lose money when you sell at a loss. If the market dips and you hold on, your shares are still yours. They still represent ownership. And when the market recovers, as history shows it always does, the value returns, sometimes stronger than before. He began to shift his thinking. Instead of fearing the dips, he expected them, not with dread, but with awareness. Like rainy days in a season of growth, they weren't a sign of failure, just part of the process. He made a simple promise to himself. When the market falls, I won't run. I'll stay. I'll breathe. Because the truth is, index fund investing isn't exciting, and that's its superpower. It doesn't lure you in with fast gains. It welcomes you with gentle compounding and rewards you for doing nothing dramatic. Jordan read more about history. He saw that over the last 100 years, the US market had risen about 10% a year on average. That includes wars, depressions, crashes, and crises. Not every year, not every decade, but over time, consistently, patiently, quietly, it rose. That comforted him more than any prediction could, because predictions can be wrong, but long-term trends, they speak the truth. A truth you can nap next to, a truth you can build a life on. He thought about his future again. But 5 years from now, 10 years, what would he tell that future version of himself if the market dipped next month? Probably something like this. Stay calm, stay steady. Remember, we're not here to win the day, we're here to build the decade. That felt real, that felt wise. He wrote one last thing in his notebook. When it falls, I rise. By staying still, it became his mantra. Not just for investing, but for life. Because peace isn't avoiding problems, it's learning to breathe through them and keep going anyway. But what if you could turn that peace into a habit? Jordan had weathered the thought of market drops like waves during a gentle storm. He didn't feel fully fearless, but he no longer froze when uncertainty brushed against his calm. He'd learned that dips weren't disasters. They were just part of the ocean. But staying calm wasn't a one-time decision. It was something he would have to choose again and again and again. That's when he realized he needed something more than knowledge. He needed structure, not rigid spreadsheets or anxiety-packed dashboards, but routines, habits, little anchors for his nervous system, something to hold on to in the quiet so panic wouldn't sneak back in. So Jordan began creating rituals, not dramatic or complicated, just soft practices, moments that made investing feel human, moments that made money feel like a friend, not a fire to control. Moments he could return to when doubt whispered again. The first ritual was simple. Checking in once a month, he picked the last Saturday morning of every month, made a cup of cinnamon tea, opened his investment account, and just looked at the number. He didn't judge. He didn't ask, is it up or is this enough? He just observed it, like watching a plant grow. Some months it would sprout, some months it might look still. But even in stillness, roots could be growing deeper. This act, this quiet looking, gave Jordan a sense of stability. Because uncertainty grows in the absence of attention. But when you look at something with love, fear softens. That's what his monthly ritual became. A kind look at his own growth, not just financial, emotional. The second ritual was what he called his future letter. Every 3 months, he wrote a tiny note to his future self. It wasn't about goals or money. It was about who he hoped to become. Peaceful, patient, proud of small steps. He'd read those letters during his monthly check-in, and sometimes his eyes would soften as he read them, because seeing how far he'd come, even in mindset, gave him quiet courage. He didn't need to be perfect, he just needed to keep showing up. Then came his third ritual, automatic investing. Jordan had learned that index fund investing worked best when you did less, not more. So he set up a recurring transfer, $150 a month into his chosen index fund. It happened without him needing to remember, like brushing his teeth or making his bed. It became invisible, yet powerful. This decision removed pressure. He didn't have to wonder when to buy in, He didn't have to time the market. He just followed his plan month after month, like planting seeds, knowing the sun would do its job. He called it financial autopilot, and it gave him peace he didn't know he needed. Because when you automate wisely, you make rest possible. You stop wrestling with willpower. You just flow. Jordan also built a ritual of celebration. Not just when the market went up, but when he followed through, when he honored his rhythm. After every third month of investing, he'd light a candle, cook a cozy meal, or watch a movie, not because of the money, but because he kept his promise. These little rewards rewired his brain. They told him that consistency matters more than speed. They reminded him that progress isn't loud, it's layered, one calm choice at a time. And that deserved a smile. He even created a safe space reminder board above his desk. It wasn't filled with charts. It had soft phrases like, "You're building something beautiful. Stay the course. The goal is peace, not performance." These words anchored him because markets could move, but his identity didn't have to. He wasn't chasing, he was nurturing. He wasn't reacting, he was remembering. Remembering why he started. Another ritual Jordan adopted was something he called the financial Sabbath. One day a month, he intentionally didn't check his accounts, read finance news, or make decisions. He simply rested, not from laziness, but from trust. Trust that his system was working, even when he wasn't watching. It was a soft rebellion against anxiety culture. Against the idea that success comes from always doing, his Sabbath whispered, "Sometimes your wealth grows best in your absence." And that made him breathe easier. He also tracked something new, his feelings, not just his funds. Every month, he'd write down how investing made him feel. Was he hopeful? Was he nervous? Did something trigger fear? This emotional journaling helped him notice patterns, and once they were noticed, they softened. He realized that his anxiety wasn't always about money. It was often about worth, about safety, about stories he didn't even know he'd inherited. And the act of naming those stories became healing. Stories like, "If I'm not constantly improving, I'm failing. If I don't have more, I'll never be enough. If I rest, I'll fall behind." One by one, Jordan met those stories with kindness and replaced them with slower truths. Progress isn't linear. Wealth is the ability to feel calm. Rest is not the enemy of growth, it's the soil of it. He also made space in his rituals for education without overwhelm. Every quarter, he'd pick one calm financial article or video, something short, something gentle, and reflect on it. No rabbit holes, no comparison traps. Just learning that nourished, not triggered. Sometimes it was a story about someone like him. Sometimes it was a simple definition. Other times, it was just a reminder that you're not behind, you're just beginning, and that was enough. To keep his rituals feeling light, Jordan also chose a symbol, a tiny sand timer. Not for urgency, but for presence. He'd flip it when he journaled or checked his account and give himself those 5 minutes as a gift. The sand reminded him, time will pass no matter what. You get to decide how gently. More than anything, Jordan learned that rituals weren't about control, they were about connection, to the process, to his values, to the version of himself he was becoming. And that connection grew stronger each time he returned to the rhythm. Even when life felt messy, even when money felt slow, even when doubt knocked, because in the quiet structure of his rituals, Jordan had found something more powerful than certainty. He had found belonging in his own financial journey. And that was the richest thing of all. But what happens when emotions try to sabotage these rituals? It was a Thursday evening when Jordan felt it again. That little tremble in his chest. Not from cold, not from coffee. From something quieter, something harder to name. A whisper of fear. The market had dipped that day. He saw the red numbers on his phone. A small drop, nothing dramatic. But it still stirred something. That old story again. What if I lose it all? Jordan had come far. He had rituals now. He had logic. He had proof that index funds were designed to ride waves. But fear doesn't always listen to logic. It listens to childhood, to old wounds, to the memory of not having enough. To the time he saw his parents whispering at the kitchen table, bills open, worry in their eyes. And in that moment, the market wasn't a graph. It was a ghost. This is the truth most investing guides won't say. Even the smartest investors get scared. Even the most automated plans can shake. Because investing, at its core, isn't just money. It's belief. Belief that the system works. Belief that time heals dips. Belief that you'll be okay. And belief is fragile when the news screams and your phone buzzes. So Jordan had to learn not just how to invest, but how to feel safe while investing. He sat on his couch, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile, and he asked himself gently, what part of me is scared right now? Not why am I scared, but which part of me? That question helped, because the part that was scared wasn't adult Jordan. It was the little boy who once watched eviction notices get taped to a neighbor's door. The teen who secretly Googled how to get rich fast after his dad lost his job. The young adult who overdrew his account and didn't tell anyone. That part of him didn't need more stocks. It needed comfort. It needed soothing. So Jordan took a deep breath and made space for both things to be true. That he was scared and that he was still safe. This is what emotional investing really looks like. Not eliminating fear, but staying present with it. Not reacting to it, just noticing it, letting it be seen. He whispered to himself something he once heard on a podcast. Panic is not a plan. And then he smiled. Because it was true. Fear could visit. But it didn't have to drive the car. He didn't check his portfolio that night. That was part of his new ritual, too. When emotions are high, the screen stays off. Because checking your investments when your nervous system is buzzing doesn't help. It makes the story louder. Instead, he drew a note. He wrote, I feel nervous. I fear losing the progress I made. But I also know I've made it through worse. And somehow putting it on paper took the weight off his shoulders. The next day, he opened the same app. The dip hadn't changed much, but he had changed. Now he was looking through a calmer lens, and the number felt like a number, not a threat. Jordan remembered what he'd learned about market behavior, that the average investor underperforms the index because of emotional decisions, that selling during fear is the biggest destroyer of returns, that time in the market beats timing the market, that staying the course is the superpower. He didn't need to be brave every moment. He just needed tools. Tiny tools, gentle ones, like his sticky note by the monitor. You're still in the game. That's all that matters today. He also found strength in stories. Stories of people who held on during scary times, like the teacher who kept investing in 2008 and retired with peace in 2020. Or the grocery clerk who didn't sell during the COVID crash and doubled her index returns by 2023. Ordinary people with ordinary courage, and Jordan realized he could be one of them. Fear, he learned, isn't something to avoid. It's something to walk beside. And the more he walked with it, the less it tried to take over. It became background noise, not the narrator. One thing that helped most was his if-then plan, a simple structure for scary days. If the market dips more than 3%, then I breathe and go for a walk. If I feel the urge to sell, then I reread my money vision. If I panic, then I text a friend or listen to my safe playlists. These actions became emotional bookmarks, tiny signs that said, you've been here before, you have a way out, not dramatic, just dependable. He also learned that emotions are data, not directives. They tell you something is happening, but they don't always tell you what to do. So he practiced this response. Thank you, fear. I see you. I'll decide in the morning. And that gave him pause, which gave him power. Over time, fear still visited, but it stopped feeling like a wave. It felt more like wind passing through, not knocking him down. He stopped gripping his account. He started trusting the process. That process included softness. He let himself feel tired sometimes. He let himself take breaks. He let himself invest just a little when life got chaotic, because consistency beats intensity. Jordan wasn't trying to be fearless. He was trying to be honest, to say, this is hard and I'm still here. To whisper, I trust the long road, even when the short one shook. He wrote one more sticky note. It said, fear wants me to protect myself. My plan already does. That became his anchor. He wasn't reacting, he was responding. And that difference between Nedrick and slow breath changed everything. It made him an investor, not just financially, but emotionally. He was investing in calm, in rhythm, in his nervous system's right to feel safe. Because wealth isn't just dollars. It's the ability to stay kind when chaos knocks. And next, Jordan would learn the one number that quietly builds the strongest piece of all. After the fear faded, Jordan felt lighter, not fearless, not invincible, just less tangled. Like he could walk again without watching every shadow. But something still stirred quietly. he realized he was missing one thing: a sense of direction. Not in the charts or stock choices, but in his why. Why was he even investing in the first place? Was it to be rich? To retire early? To beat someone else's score? Or was it something smaller, softer? A version of life that simply felt enough. That word kept circling in his mind. Enough. Not more. Not if only. Just enough. He had never really defined it. Not in numbers, not in needs, not in emotions. So now, he made space to explore it. He sat with a warm blanket, opened his journal, and wrote this question: what would life look like if I had enough? The answer didn't come fast, but that was okay, because real peace takes its time. He started with feelings. Enough meant he could breathe before opening emails. It meant groceries without guilt. It meant being generous without fear. It meant weekends that didn't need to prove anything. Then he imagined his enough day. He woke up slowly, made breakfast at home, worked a few hours on something that mattered, took a walk, hugged someone, slept deeply. No luxury yachts, no grand gestures, just space and security. And maybe a little sunshine. He started writing down the parts of that life. A small home, reliable transportation, health insurance, $50 a week for fun, $200 a month for giving. He added it up gently, and when he bid, a number appeared. Not a perfect number, but a peaceful one. His enough number, it wasn't flashy. It wasn't what Instagram promised, but it was enough for him, enough to feel safe, enough to sleep well. That's when he discovered the quiet truth most people never talk about. You don't have to chase more when you know you're enough. This changed how he looked at his index funds. They weren't just a savings tool, they were a bridge from worry to freedom. A slow-moving, steady bridge built brick by brick. He learned from trusted voices that long-term index investors often earn 7 to 8% average returns annually through a twilling framework. Not overnight, not every year, but over time, that rhythm builds wealth quietly. It's like watching trees grow. You don't hear it, but one day, you're standing in a forest. So Jordan ran some numbers. If he invested $250 a month into a broad index fund with 8% returns in 25 years, he'd likely have around $220,000. Enough for peace, enough for choices. Suddenly, the goal became less stressful. It wasn't about $1 million. It was about that future day, the day he could buy time. Time to rest, time to create, time to create. That realization softened his approach. He didn't chase trends anymore, didn't worry about temporary noise. He had a number, a destination, and now, a reason. He also realized something else. Enough is a feeling first. Even if the math made sense, the mindset mattered more. Because someone with $5 million can still feel scared, and someone with $5,000 can feel calm. So he worked on both. The outer progress and the inner permission. To stop performing and start feeling safe. He set boundaries around that feeling. No checking his portfolio more than twice a month. No comparing his timeline to friends. No chasing gains that cost him peace. And always, always checking in with his enough. Sometimes that meant adjusting it. Life shifts needs shift, but the core remained. Money is not the goal. Peace is. He also gave himself milestones. Not for celebration, but reflection. When his portfolio hit $10,000, he bought a small painting. It wasn't about reward. It was about remembering. I'm building this life slowly. That painting hung in his hallway. It showed a path through a forest. Curved, gentle, still growing. And every time he passed it, Jordan whispered, I'm still walking. I'm still becoming. Eventually, he started teaching others about enough. He didn't have a degree. Just stories, just warmth, just proof that peace was possible. He told friends, define your enough early, because if you don't, the world will define it for you, and it will always ask for more. Some laughed, some nodded, but a few paused, and that pause was enough. It planted something. Jordan also created a ritual around his number. Every new year, he'd sit in silence for 10 minutes. He'd breathe and ask himself, does my definition of enough still feel good? Sometimes it grew, sometimes it shrank, but it always stayed grounded in kindness. That's what made it enough. Not the number, the compassion beneath it. And in that compassion, Jordan found his rhythm again. No longer investing from fear, no longer chasing escape, just walking forward. just choosing soft steps. He had become something many investors never name. Not rich, not fancy, but steady, anchored, and free. Because when you know you're enough, you stop running, you start resting, you start living. But what if life throws a curveball? What if things change? It was raining that Tuesday. Jordan had just made his morning coffee when his phone buzzed with news from the mechanic. His car wasn't just making a weird noise, it needed major repairs, the kind that make your heart drop faster than the weather app. He sighed, leaned on the counter, and looked out the window. It wasn't just the car. His sister had called the night before. Their mom's health was declining. And at work, rumors had started swirling about layoffs in the next quarter. It felt like everything was falling out of rhythm. His savings plan, his weekly investing habit, even his belief that things were finally steady. Just a few chapters ago, Jordan had learned to automate his index fund contributions. He built a routine that felt like brushing his teeth. Gentle, predictable, clean. But now, life had a different rhythm. A rhythm of disruption. A rhythm he didn't choose. For a moment, Jordan stared at his investing app and felt stuck. He didn't want to stop, but he also didn't want to ignore the storm happening in real life. And so, for the first time since he started this journey, he paused. Not from fear, from wisdom. Sometimes pressing pause is what a mature investor does, not as an escape, but as a way to protect peace. He sat with the discomfort. It came in waves. Was he giving up? Was he failing the plan? Would this break everything he built? He reminded himself the market wasn't going anywhere. And his past choices, those quiet deposits, those steady moments, were still working, even when he wasn't. This is the part no one talks about loudly. The moments when investing meets real life, when the emergency room visit matters more than the S&P 500. When buying groceries feels heavier than picking stocks, Jordan knew the advice. Invest consistently, never stop, but he also knew his humanity. And his humanity needed him to reroute his energy, for now. He opened a new tab and searched how to pause investing during life emergencies. To his surprise, he wasn't alone. He found stories from others who had paused. Not because they panicked, but because they prioritized the present. Stories from people who leaned on emergency funds while letting their index funds rest untouched. People who reminded him that long-term investing is, by nature, long-term. He even came across a quiet line in a financial therapist's blog. Sometimes, the most powerful financial decision is to care for your present self, so your future self has the strength to return. So, Jordan made a plan. A new plan, a softer one. He set his auto investments to pause for 3 months. He created a bare-bones budget. Rent, food, meds, car. That was the core. That was enough. And instead of contributing to his index fund, he focused on rebuilding his emergency fund. Slowly, gently. Each week, he tracked small wins. A $25 deposit into savings. A home-cooked meal instead of takeout. A rideshare with a friend instead of a solo drive. These weren't sacrifices. They were survival strategies, done with dignity. And each night, Jordan reminded himself his past investing choices were still growing. The market was still open. The journey hadn't ended. It had simply curved. One evening, sitting under a soft blanket, he opened his app just to check. His portfolio had dipped, sure, but it hadn't crashed. It was still there, like a tree quietly growing in winter. He smiled. It hit him then. Investing isn't about never stopping. It's about knowing when to rest and when to resume. He realized that the best investors aren't the ones who never face life's interruptions. They're the ones who stay kind when it happens. They don't abandon the plan, they adapt it. This moment, this pause, was part of the plan too. He scribbled in his journal that night, "When life interrupts, I am allowed to change the pace. My peace is not a performance. My progress is not a race." Weeks passed, the car got fixed. His mom's condition stabilized. His hours at work slowly returned. The fog lifted, and so, with a gentle click, Jordan resumed his contributions. But this time, with even more clarity, he didn't jump back in at full speed. He eased in. $30 a week, then $50, then back to his normal flow. It wasn't about catching up, it was about continuing with grace. He also set a new rule for himself. Every time I hit a bump in life, I will first protect myself, then return to my plan when I can breathe again. Because that's what real financial wellness looks like. Not hustle, not guilt, not never stop, but pause if needed and come back when you're ready. Jordan even shared this story with a coworker one day, someone who was just starting to learn about index funds. They asked him, "What happens if I can't keep investing during hard months?" He answered, "Then you rest. And when life calms down, you return. Your index fund will be there, and so will your strength." That coworker smiled, and Jordan felt something warm, a full circle kind of warmth. Because the truth is, life will interrupt, but your wisdom doesn't leave with it. It stays, and sometimes it deepens. Jordan looked out the window again, this time on a quiet evening. No more rain, just stars. His portfolio wasn't massive, but it was strong, because he had learned the skill most people skip: how to pause without shame, how to return with softness, and how to keep going. Not perfectly, but gently. And just as the world outside began to feel calm again, Jordan would discover something he hadn't expected at all: a conversation that would change his understanding of money forever. The coffee shop was warm and filled with quiet chatter. Jordan had arrived early, not out of nervousness, but out of habit. These days, early felt like peace, like claiming a moment before the world could rush in. He chose a corner seat by the window, the one with the soft light and the view of the trees outside swaying slowly in the afternoon breeze. A clearer thought there, and somewhere in between, he had started to feel different. Not rich, not ahead, just a little more rooted. Today was different. Not because of the coffee, not even because he had just resumed his index fund contributions after a short pause. Today was different because someone had asked him to explain it. His friend Leah, who had just started her first full-time job, had texted him with a single sentence. "Okay, explain index funds to me like I'm 5, and tell me if I'm already too late." He'd smiled when he read it. The confusion of where to begin, the feeling of being the only one who didn't get it. Jordan knew those feelings like old roommates. Now, he was the one on the other side of that conversation. He wasn't an expert, but he knew something deeper: how it felt to be lost, and how it felt to be gently found. Leah walked in a few minutes later, her scarf slightly crooked and her eyes curious but hesitant. She plopped into the seat across from him, exhaled dramatically, and said, "Okay, I hate this stuff, but I know I need to understand it, so be nice." Jordan nodded softly. "Always," he said. "Let's start with this. Imagine a giant fruit basket." Leah blinked. "What?" Jordan smiled. "Stay with me. That fruit basket holds apples, bananas, grapes, oranges, all kinds of fruits. Now, instead of trying to guess which fruit will be the tastiest this year, you just decide to buy a little piece of the whole basket." Leah leaned in. "So, I don't have to guess?" "Nope," he said. "That's what an index fund is. It's like buying a tiny share of every company in a basket, usually the top 500 in the country or more. Instead of trying to pick the best stock, you own a little bit of all of them. So when some go down, others go up. And over time, the whole basket usually grows." She sipped her tea. "Okay, that's actually kind of soothing." Jordan laughed. "It is. That's the point. It's not flashy, but it's peaceful." Leah tilted her head. "But what if I want more, like faster growth?" He nodded. "That's fair. And some people do go for fast, but it usually means more risk, more noise, more guessing. Index funds are like the quiet library kid who shows up every day and just keeps learning. Slow and steady, but powerful." She nodded slowly. "So how do I start? What do I need?" Jordan pulled out his phone. "Honestly, not much. A free brokerage app, a bit of research to make sure you're choosing a fund that follows the market, like one that tracks the S&P 500, and then just start. Even with $10. She blinked. "That's it." "Yep. And if you automate it like $25 every paycheck, you don't even have to think about it. It just builds quietly in the background." Leah leaned back. "This is actually calming. Like I can finally see a way forward that doesn't feel overwhelming." Jordan nodded. "That's how it felt to me, too. At first, I thought I had to know everything, but index funds gave me permission to not be perfect." There was a pause, not awkward, just thoughtful. Then Leah asked, "Do you remember when you first learned this stuff? Like what made you trust it?" Jordan looked down for a moment. Then he smiled softly. "I was tired, burned out from trying to catch up. I kept feeling like I was always behind, no matter how much I worked. Then one night, I read about Jack Bogle, the guy who made the first index fund. He wasn't trying to get rich. He was trying to make investing honest again. That moved me. Leah nodded. That's rare. Most finance stuff feels like it's just trying to sell me something. Jordan agreed. But this felt different. It felt like someone finally saying, you're allowed to go slow, you're allowed to rest, you're allowed to build wealth without stress. Leah smiled. Okay, I think I want that too. They sat in silence for a bit. Not heavy, just full. One kept a little notebook. Every time I made a deposit, even $10, I'd write it like a love letter to my future self. Hey, I know life's wild right now, but here's a tiny seed. You'll thank me later. Leah laughed. That's really sweet and kind of brilliant. Jordan shrugged. It helped me stay connected because money isn't just numbers, it's feelings, it's hopes, it's safety. She grew quiet, then asked, is it too late for me? Jordan looked her in the eyes. No, it's never too late to start being kind to yourself. Leah exhaled, and with that, she opened her phone, downloaded an app, and whispered, okay, let's do this. One fruit basket at a time. Jordan watched her, heart full. He hadn't become a millionaire, but he had become something more rare, someone who could explain peace. That night, he walked home feeling lighter, not because the market was up, not because he had more money, but because he had passed something on, something real, something soft and strong. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being patient. And now, Jordan was ready to dream bigger. Not in numbers, but in meaning. Because once you've taught someone else, something inside you changes. You start to believe it even more. He stood by his window, looked up at the sky, and smiled. He didn't know what the market would do tomorrow, but he knew who he was becoming, and that felt like wealth. What Jordan didn't know yet was that his next step wouldn't be about learning or teaching. It would be about unlearning. The quiet, hidden beliefs he never knew were holding him back were about to surface and reshape everything. Jordan was folding laundry when it happened. A sock, half tucked in his palm, reminded him of something he hadn't thought about in years. It was the way his dad used to roll them tight and toss them into a drawer like they were soldiers lining up for duty. It made Jordan pause, because that little memory brought up something else. Not just how his father folded socks, but how he folded emotions, especially when it came to money. Growing up, there were two things you didn't talk about in Jordan's house: feelings and finances. Not because anyone was being cruel, but because they were scared. Scared that if they looked too closely at either one, everything might come undone. And so, like many of us, Jordan inherited silence. He didn't know how much his parents made, or what happened when bills were late. He only knew the tension that filled the room when envelopes from the electric company sat unopened. He remembered the way his mom would sigh in the grocery aisle, calculating which brand of cereal to put back. He remembered his dad saying, "We can't afford that," even when Jordan didn't ask for anything. That was how Jordan learned about money, not through lessons, but through looks, through quiet trade-offs, through the unspoken message that money was always about not having enough. And when he started earning money himself, that feeling followed. It didn't matter that he had a job, or that he was saving. There was always a sense that it could all disappear, that he wasn't doing enough, that the next emergency would prove he didn't belong in this world of financially literate people. Even after he began investing in index funds, even after he started feeling more steady, that old voice crept in. "Don't relax," it said. "You'll mess this up." So he kept checking his account more often than he needed to. He kept over-researching. He kept feeling like a fraud. Until one evening, sitting at his desk, Jordan had a thought he'd never had before. What if this isn't about the numbers? He looked around the room. Nothing was wrong. Rent was paid. Food was in the fridge. His index fund was quietly growing, just like it was supposed to. But his heart still felt tense, like he was waiting for bad news that hadn't arrived. That's when it hit him. He wasn't reacting to now. He was reacting to then. To the emotional fingerprints left on his nervous system by the stories he never chose, the ones passed down through stress and sacrifice. The truth was, Jordan had been carrying someone else's money wounds. His mom's guilt, his dad's survival mode, his family's scarcity mindset. It made sense. Most of us don't learn about money through calm conversation. We learn it through tension, through watching adults panic or hide things or work themselves to the bone. Through being told we can't afford that more than, "Here's how we make a plan." And even when we grow up and make different choices, those old messages can stick. They whisper behind every transaction. You're not allowed to feel safe. Jordan knew he had to do something different. Not with his money, with his story. He opened a notebook and titled the page, "Beliefs I Didn't Choose." He started writing. Money is always stressful. People like us don't invest. You have to work until you're exhausted to deserve rest. Money is a source of conflict. If I succeed, I'll make others feel bad. I'll never understand how money works. He stared at the list. These weren't facts. These were feelings, inherited ones. And then he wrote something else beside each one. Money can be peaceful if I let it be. I am allowed to invest simply. Rest is not something I earn. It's something I need. I can use money to create harmony. There's enough for all of us. I've already started understanding more than I thought. It wasn't magic, but it felt healing, because rewriting your money story isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about telling the truth and choosing a softer truth to live with today. Jordan wasn't trying to be rich. He was trying to feel safe, grounded, whole, and index funds, as strange as it once sounded, were helping him get there. Not because they made him more money overnight, but because they gave him a rhythm, a sense of control that didn't depend on guessing or gambling. They were boring, in the best way, predictable, steady, reassuring. Every automatic deposit felt like a quiet act of rebellion against the story that said he would always struggle. Every monthly contribution was like whispering to his younger self, "You're doing okay, you're safe now." Jordan smiled. He didn't have to hustle his way out of anxiety anymore. He could heal. And as he flipped the page in his notebook, he began to write something new. The life I want to build. He didn't write big, flashy goals. He wrote soft ones. A quiet home, a fridge with options. Time to rest, time to create. The ability to help his parents without hurting himself. Those weren't dreams, those were needs. Real, gentle needs. He didn't need to be extraordinary. He just wanted to stop feeling afraid. And that was enough. That night, as Jordan made tea and got ready for bed, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. But because he was finally letting go of the story that said it had to be. He lay in bed and whispered the words again. I am safe, I am steady, I am allowed to feel peace. Outside, the world was still spinning, but inside something had finally gone quiet. And in that stillness, he felt ready for what came next. Jordan didn't notice the change at first. It was quiet, like most good things are. There wasn't a dramatic moment or a proud announcement, just a slow calm that started to replace the old buzz of worry. He used to check his bank account every day, sometimes more than once. It wasn't about the money, it was about the fear of not knowing, the fear of missing, the fear of falling behind. But now, the fear wasn't as loud. It started the day he realized he had gone a full week without checking, not because he was avoiding it, but because he didn't feel the need. He trusted that the small step he'd taken months ago, setting up an automatic deposit into an index fund, was still happening behind the scenes. That one decision had become a soft rhythm in his life. It wasn't big, just a quiet $25 every week, but it felt like something strong. It was the first habit he'd ever stuck with that didn't feel like pressure. It felt like care, like watering a plant, not sprinting a race. Every time he opened the app, he saw that small line gently moving up. It didn't surge, it didn't crash, it just moved, slowly and patiently, like roots growing beneath the surface. Jordan thought about that often now. Roots, the things you can't see but rely on every day. He began to realize that his peace wasn't coming from some future wealth. It was coming from the act of consistency, of proving to himself, week after week, that he could do something steady. He remembered when he used to think $25 wasn't enough. Back then, he believed money only mattered if it came in big waves. Bonuses, raises, side hustles that promised to double everything. But that way of thinking left him tired. Always reaching, always restless. This was different. This was slow and honest and enough. He wrote in his journal, I've stopped trying to be fast. Now I just want to be steady. That line stuck with him. It reminded him that wealth wasn't just about how much you had, it was also about how little stress you felt while building it. And slowly, his stress was shrinking. The act of investing just a little was helping him breathe easier. It wasn't just the money growing, it was his belief in himself. Each small win became a signpost. Not flashy, not loud, just quiet proof that he was changing. The win of skipping a panic sell when the market dipped the win of saying no to a late-night purchase he didn't need, the win of choosing to rest instead of over-researching, the win of explaining index funds to someone with a smile instead of fear. These were small, but they were big. Because when you're used to chaos, even calm feels like a revolution. Jordan's life hadn't changed on the outside. His job was the same. His rent hadn't gone down, but he had changed inside. He no longer saw himself as someone trying to catch up. He saw himself as someone growing softly, quietly, and with purpose. One morning, while eating breakfast, he looked over at his calendar. He realized that it had been 6 months since his first deposit. Without trying to be perfect, he had built something. That morning, he opened his app. The number wasn't huge, but it was his, and more than that, it was proof. Proof that something tiny could become something strong. Proof that peace comes from habits, not windfalls. Proof that he could trust himself with money, after all. He smiled and made tea, thinking about how strange it was that something as simple as a low-cost index fund, a thing he once found intimidating, had become a quiet friend in the background of his life. And now, that friend was growing. He texted Leah a simple message. 6 months, we're doing it. She replied almost instantly. Same here. I never thought I'd feel proud about money. Jordan paused, then typed, it's not about the money. It's about what it means. Leah just sent a heart emoji. But Jordan knew she got it. Because in a world that tells you to chase more, learning to feel good about small. Honest progress is a kind of superpower. It meant he no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He didn't need to win a game. He just needed to keep planting. And so, that's what he did. Each week, one deposit, one note to himself, one tiny act of care for a future he was starting to believe in. That night, Jordan stood on his balcony. The wind was soft. The city lights twinkled. He breathed in deeply, knowing he had done one more small thing that made a big difference. And somewhere inside, he felt taller. Not because of money, but because he was finally rooted. What Jordan didn't know yet was that something deeper was about to awaken. Because money, once safe, starts to unlock new questions about dreams, about purpose, about the kind of life you're allowed to want. The morning light was soft, the kind that wrapped around the room like a blanket. Jordan was sitting on the edge of his bed holding a warm mug in his hands, watching steam rise slowly into the air. There was no rush, no alarms, just space. He had started waking up earlier, not because he had to, but because it felt good. His mornings had become a quiet celebration of how far he'd come. The stress that once hovered over every dollar was starting to melt away. His financial life had become steady, not perfect, but peaceful. He had enough in savings to breathe. His index fund was growing with quiet strength, and most importantly, he didn't feel like he was constantly running anymore. There was still work to do, but the fear had softened. And in that softness, a new question had started to rise. If I'm no longer scared, what do I want? It was a question that surprised him. He had spent so long trying to escape the feeling of not having enough. Now that he felt a little more secure, he wasn't sure what came next. For most of his life, money had been about survival, bills, groceries, avoiding overdrafts. Then it became about learning, figuring out what things like diversification and expense ratios meant. But now it felt like it needed to be something more. Jordan didn't want to just have money. He wanted to feel like his money reflected who he was. That was the beginning of something new. Alignment, not the flashy kind. Not quit your job and live on a beach kind. Just the kind where your spending, saving, and investing actually match your values. He pulled out a notebook and wrote a question at the top of the page. What does a rich life look like to me? Not what others said, not what influencers showed, not what his childhood taught him, just him. He sat with the question longer than expected, because for the first time he wasn't answering from fear. He was answering from peace. The answers that came were soft, gentle, personal. A rich life means taking a slow walk after work, not rushing to a second shift. It means saying yes to my niece's birthday without checking my balance. It means working fewer hours someday so I can write or just rest. It means giving quietly without needing anyone to know. It means being able to say no, not because I can't, but because I can. That was his definition. And the more he looked at it, the more he realized index investing was already helping him build that. It wasn't just about money growing. It was about time unlocking. Each dollar he set aside wasn't just earning interest. It was earning him permission. permission to rest, to say no, to choose peace. He had never seen money that way before, as something that bought him back his life, one tiny slice at a time. It was strange how simple it felt now. Investing wasn't about beating the market. It was about creating space, mental space, emotional space, time space. That's what real wealth was starting to look like. Jordan thought about the old version of himself, the one who stayed up late watching YouTube videos on how to retire early, and best crypto coins of the month. He had wanted freedom, but he had chased it in chaos. Now he was creating it in calm. He looked around his apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like his budget wasn't perfect, but it was kind. His investments weren't flashy, but they were steady. And for the first time, his financial life wasn't about performance. It was about alignment. The way he used his money now felt gentle, like a soft yes to the life he actually wanted, instead of a loud maybe to a life he thought he should chase. That afternoon, Jordan went for a walk through the park. He passed a group of kids playing tag, an older man feeding birds, a young couple sitting on a bench holding hands, smiling for no reason. It all felt quiet, honest, rich. He realized something important. Wealth isn't about owning the most, it's about needing less to feel whole. And that was what investing had given him. Not just growth, but grounding. Jordan sat under a tree and pulled out his phone. He looked at his app. The graph was still rising slowly. No big jumps, just a calm climb. He smiled and whispered, "Thank you." Not to the app, but to himself, for not giving up when it was hard, for starting even when it felt small, for staying steady when others rushed, for believing in a version of wealth that felt soft, slow, and true. That night, as he crawled into bed, he didn't feel like someone on a financial journey. He felt like someone at peace with his place. Not because everything was done, but because his direction felt right. He had aligned his values with his money. And in that alignment, something gentle had grown. A sense of enoughness. A belief that he didn't have to prove anything anymore. Because when money stops being about survival, it can finally become about meaning. But Jordan didn't know the full story yet, because even the calmest path brings surprises. And sometimes, life whispers a new purpose when you're finally ready to hear it. The library was quiet, just the soft rustle of pages and the gentle hum of a ceiling fan overhead. Jordan sat at a small round table, sipping tea from a thermos, a notebook open beside him. Across the table sat MIA, wide-eyed 23, and full of questions. She had asked him to meet not because he was an expert, but because she had watched him change. Over the past year, she saw how he stopped panicking about money, how he smiled more, how he said no to things without guilt, and how, once during a lunch break, he casually mentioned index funds like it was no big deal. But to her, it was a big deal. She had never met someone who talked about money softly. So here they were, two people, one story, slowly unfolding. Mia spoke first. "I don't really get how investing works, but I want to feel less frantic." Jordan nodded. That word frantic, he knew it well. He smiled gently. "It's not about knowing everything. It's about starting from peace." She looked at him, unsure. He pulled out a pen and drew a little tree. "This is you, your time, your energy." When you plant something, anything a little bit grows. Investing is just planting, over and over. Not to get rich overnight, just to feel less afraid tomorrow. Mia exhaled. "That sounds kind," Jordan laughed softly. "That's the goal." As he explained how index funds worked, he didn't use big words, he used metaphors. The way Bogle did, the way he wished someone had spoken to him years ago. He described index funds like grocery baskets. He explained compound interest like bedtime stories, piling into a bookshelf, slow at first, then full. He talked about automatic investing as brushing your teeth. You don't notice the change every day, but over time, it becomes your strength. Mia smiled. "You make it sound doable." Jordan's heart warmed, because this was something he never expected. That helping someone else feel safe with money would make him feel even more rooted. It was like every time he said, "You can do this," a little echo came back to him too. "You can do this, Jordan. You already are." The next week, Mia texted him, "I did it. I opened the account. $10 to start," Jordan replied. "That's the loudest $10 the future will ever hear." He meant it, because money teaches best through whispering. Through moments where someone believes something new is possible. Mia wasn't the only one. Jordan found himself gently helping more people. A cousin who was saving for college but didn't know how to begin. A coworker who always thought investing was for rich people. A neighbor who once said, "I'm too old to start," and who now smiles every time she makes a deposit. Jordan didn't call it teaching, he just called it sharing. And every time he did, something in him healed. There was something powerful about saying out loud what you had once been afraid to even Google. It turned shame into wisdom, fear into service, silence into permission. The more he gave, the more he grew, not his portfolio, because sharing what you've learned, especially when you had to learn it the hard way, is a form of abundance too. He started keeping a little notebook, not with stock tips, with sentences, gentle ones, the kind he wished he'd heard sooner. You don't need to be perfect to begin. Even a little invested is better than nothing saved. Financial peace is a direction, not a destination. You're not behind, you're just beginning. He shared these like seeds. In quiet conversations, on the phone with an old friend, and every time it felt like planting something soft in someone's soil. Not to grow money, to grow hope. He had come full circle. Once, money was his fear. Then it became his tool. Now, it was his gift. Not because he had millions, but because he had kindness and clarity. And those are the most valuable currencies of all. That night, Jordan walked home beneath a sky full of stars. He paused outside his building, looking up. He felt something gentle settle in his chest, a quiet knowing that his life no longer needed to look impressive to feel meaningful. He had chosen a path that aligned with peace, and now he was leaving breadcrumbs for others. Tiny, steady, soft. He whispered to himself, "This is wealth." Not the flashy kind, the healing kind. The kind that ripples without shouting. The kind that passes from one heart to another. He smiled, thinking of Mia, of her $10, of her new calm, and of how, in helping her plant, he had grown too. Because the final step in financial peace is helping someone else find their own. You made it, not just to the end of a video, but to a new understanding. A calmer way to think about money, a softer way to build wealth, a gentler way to trust yourself with your financial future, and maybe a deeper sense that you were never behind, that your past with money didn't disqualify you, that slow, steady, and sleepy investing, like index funds, can be more powerful than all the noise, all the hype, all the pressure. Let's take a breath together, in and out. Now, let's remember what you've explored tonight. You don't need a finance degree to grow wealth. You don't need to time the market to succeed. You don't need to be fearless, just consistent, just kind, just awake enough to take one small step at a time. You saw Jordan's journey, from confusion to clarity, from survival to enough, from private fear to shared wisdom. You learned how index funds can be your quiet friend, how automating tiny contributions can lead to mighty peace, how understanding you're enough is the most powerful decision you can make. And you saw what happens when someone teaches it forward. Now, if your eyes are still open and your heart is still listening, here's your gentle action plan. No pressure, just an invitation. If you're still awake, try one of these. 1. Write your enough number, not the number to impress others. The one that would help you sleep better at night. Is it 3 months of rent saved? A tiny emergency cushion. Write it down. Let it guide you. 2. Open that account. If you haven't yet, look into a Roth IRA or a simple brokerage account with low-cost index fund options. Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, and even newer apps like SoFi or M1 Finance can be calm starting points. $5 is enough to begin. 3. Set up one auto transfer. Just one. Even $10 a week. Automate it. Forget about it. That's how quiet wealth begins. Foretell someone what you learned, not in a lecture, just a gentle story like Jordan. Hey, I watched this calming video about index funds. It made me feel less scared about money. You might be the whisper that changes someone's life. 5. Ask yourself, what does a rich life feel like for me? List what truly matters. Time, freedom, rest, giving, art, family, health. Let those values lead your money, not the other way around. This wasn't just a story about investing. It was a story about trust. Trusting that you're capable of change, that you're worthy of ease, that wealth can grow from soft soil, not struggle. So tonight, maybe you don't need to do more. Maybe you just needed to remember that you're already becoming someone new, Gently, slowly, surely. No rush, no pressure, just quiet forward motion. And if your eyelids are heavy now, that's okay. Let the peace you've gathered carry you into rest. Tomorrow will still be here, and so will your story. You're allowed to write it with calm. You're allowed to heal. You're allowed to grow rich, quietly. Good night, future millionaire. And if you'd like more gentle stories like this, come back tomorrow. We're here every night.